All right, it's recording, I guess. Yeah, so setting up the context for today's video, we are going to talk about infrastructure as code. Yeah, so let's say it's the year 2010. It's the year 2010, and you join a startup as a DevOps engineer. Cool. And this startup is a new one. So when you joined, your team lead said that, hey, we are going to deploy 30 apps. You are free to choose between AWS, Azure, GCP, and any other cloud provider that you like. Cool. You joined as a DevOps engineer, and as soon as joining the startup, you are given a task that we are setting up an infrastructure, and in that infrastructure, you are free to choose AWS, GCP, and Azure. Cool. So you had worked with AWS, so you selected that. You told them that, hey, we are going to use AWS, and are you guys okay with it? And they told that, yeah, they are good with it, you can proceed. Okay. Now the target is to deploy 30 applications. All right. Now the target is to deploy 30 applications, and you are a good DevOps developer, DevOps engineer. You are a good DevOps engineer, that's why they hired you, right? So you are obviously not going to the UI and manually creating EC2 instances, S3 buckets, and whatnot. You're not going to do that. Okay. So what is the another way around? So you are going to interact with AWS API via something, right? So you are going to use AWS CLI. So what is CLI? CLI stands for command line interface. I'm not going to write it down, but you selected AWS CLI and you made a bash script. So now in order to deploy 30 apps with different security groups, inbound rules, outbound rules, different S3 buckets, different EC2 instances, different resources, and whatnot. So you decided that you are going to make a script, bash script. You are going to use AWS CLI, and in order to deploy those 30 apps, you wrote around, let's say, we are assuming everything, 15 scripts. Cool. And you set up the whole infra of that startup. Cool. But let's say 3 months have passed. Your startup was working fine, but now AWS has increased their pricing. All right. Now coming back that your startup is new, so there is some money problem. Let's assume that money issues. Is my mic working? Yeah, I have to check it. So your startup have money issues, and the management came to you. Let's say a lead developer. Yeah, a lead developer came to you and told you that, hey, we cannot afford AWS now. You have to choose another. Cool. So you initially selected AWS, but it's out of choice now. So you move to Azure. Cool. You move to Azure. Now the problem is, in order to set up your infrastructure of we assume 30 applications, you had to make 15 scripts for AWS CLI. Similarly, Azure would have something, right? And you are going to use it, but the workflow will be different. So for Azure, let's say you had gone through the pain of migrating your scripts for Azure, and you took around 25 scripts. This is purely hypothetical and we are assuming things. So you took 25, you made 25 scripts in order to migrate your infrastructure to Azure. Cool, 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 cool. Everything going good. Now let's say GCP introduced a winter plan. Now you are now in, let's say, Q4, and GCP introduced a winter plan and they made everything discounted around 50%. Cool. So now the management guy came again and told you that, hey, we need to migrate to GCP now. Now you're getting what I'm trying to say, right? The migration process is so hectic now. Your startup obviously grew in those period of time. You don't have 30 applications now, you have 150 applications. There was exponential growth and you have 150 applications now. Now you are going to convert those 150 applications. Let's say you have around 100 scripts. You are going to write it again for GCP now. Okay. Now a single guy cannot obviously do it, so you hire more DevOps engineer, and they work pretty hard, and they will have to make around they will have to migrate around these 100 scripts to GCP. You got the point, right? We are in the year 2010. So it's year 2014 now, and a company known as HashiCorp introduced something called Terraform. What is Terraform? So Terraform is an infrastructure as code tool that lets you build, change, and version infrastructure safely and efficiently. What it means. So here comes the topic of today's video, that is infrastructure as code. We are defining our infrastructure in code. Now you will ask me that earlier also, Dhruv, we were writing scripts, so we were kind of defining infrastructure as code, right? Well, I agree with you. You were too back then were defining your infrastructure as code, but that was for a single cloud provider. This includes low-level components like compute instances, storage, EC2 machines, SD buckets, and networking high-level DNS entry. Now, what Terraform does? Terraform does one thing in a unique way. You were scripting everything for every cloud provider separately. You had the pain to learn. You had to go through the pain to learn G-Cloud CLI. You had to go through the pain to learn AWS CLI, Azure CLI, and any cloud provider that you worked with. But Terraform changed things. Terraform introduced something known as HCL language, HashiCorp language, and you just need to define some things. Let's go to the documentation. What use cases? Let's go to the use case of Terraform. HashiCorp Terraform is an infrastructure as code that lets you define infrastructure in a human readable configuration. No bash script that someone will understand and someone would not. There also in bash script there will always be a issue that you can mess some things, right? You can mess things up and it would be hard for another developer to understand. So HashiCorp lets us define infrastructure in human readable configuration files that we can version, we can reuse and share. You can use a consistent workflow to safely and efficiently provision and manage your infrastructure throughout its lifecycle. And something multi-cloud deployment. This is most revolutionizing part of HashiCorp. Okay, so this was the introduction on Terraform. We are going to dive deep into this in the upcoming videos. I just wanted to set up a context for the future videos in this video. Thank you guys for watching. Hope to see you guys in the next one.